listening to the Budget Overland podcast, where we talk everything overlanding, have guests on regularly, and even have a bonus show on Mondays called Overland Shenanigans, which it's like it sounds, a bunch of shenanigans. Stick around, see who's on today's episode. Welcome back to another episode of the Budget Overland podcast. Guys, I'm stoked for this episode. I've been wanting to talk about this for a while. A lot of you are interested as well. In-house, I've got Jake over here from Green Country 12 Volt, and I met him last weekend in Tulsa at the Okie Overland swap meet, and he was just kind of walking by, and I don't even know how we started talking, and we got onto this topic of like onboard power, solar, all this stuff. This is what he does for a living. And Wade, Uncle Wade's what we call him, he said, hey, that'd make great podcast content. And I looked over at Wade, and I was like, yes, it would. So, in-house, I've got Jake. Jake, man, how's it going, man?
Oh, man, it's going good. Going good. It's been a hot week here in Oklahoma. I'm sure you're experiencing a lot of the same. Yes.
I'm glad this worked out. And I'm not only going to say this right now because you already know this. Like, this is the last minute for me. Podcast is launched tomorrow morning at 3 a.m. and it is currently 8:20 on a Wednesday night. So it's coming in a crunch, and I didn't put all my eggs in just one basket, but I appreciate you truly for coming on. I know a lot of people get flaky. I had two people that are international travelers that were supposed to be on this week, and they just couldn't cut it because of internet. And then I'm so glad I ran into you, and you were like all about coming on here, and I truly appreciate you being here, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I love being here. I think I've got quite the advantage over those guys, being that I'm stationary at home with fiber internet, you know.
Fiber.
Just that I can't be on the road like them, but at least they're they're making it.
What's cool is we just got fiber too, and I couldn't tell you much about it other than it's like been a month. So far, it's okay. It's kind of new in our area. We're rural Missouri, but before we get into anything, we're going to talk about onboard power, like dual batteries. Do you run solar? Do you run inverters? What do you need to make your camping trips more enjoyable and feasible without doing overkill or underkill? But before we get into all that, Jake, let's learn a little bit more about you and how you got involved with this camping overland style, if you will.
Yeah, man. So a lot of my life has kind of been based around being outdoors a lot. I've always, been drawn to the outdoors no matter where we went. I've done, lots of everything from staying in the cabin down to kind of building your own fort in the woods when I was, when young teens and stuff like that. Stayed outside a lot, morel hunting. We do a lot of that here in Oklahoma. So I've always been kind of an outdoorsy person.
Sweet, man. So whenever you got into you were telling me earlier about your Sequoia, how did you guys get involved with making that decision to have it, or for that rig particular? Did you already have that rig and you made it work for y'all, and then did you guys ever? I don't even know much about you and your rig or anything, but talk us about all of that and how you got into it.
Yeah, man. So basically, I've always been into short wide Chevys and hot rods and stuff like that, and unfortunately, one of the downsides of those is they're not very reliable. Well, I bought a 01 Honda Civic that was a pretty decent condition from a buddy, just as once my engine blew, and was driving that around. I met a guy that actually had a Sequoia, and he was like, man, this is just way too much vehicle for me. And he was like, would you be interested in trading? I was like, straight across? He goes, yeah. And I kind of looked on Kelley Blue Book. I've always traded up and stuff.
Sure.
Looked on Kelley Blue Book. I think my car was going for $700 at the moment. And the Sequoia was sitting at almost $8,000 in value.
Oh,
and I was like, man,
goodness.
all the little problems it's got. I've always been a Toyota fan too. So
nice.
I was pretty stoked, honestly, to be able to get my hands on one without having to spend an exorbitant amount of money. Kind of lucked into the deal. So
yeah, man, that's really cool. And to be honest, within the last couple of years, obviously this whole overland thing just blowed up. But I think the number one, not number one, but a lot of the mid-size, lower entry level like mine, I've got a third gen, 4Runner. Those used to be able to pick up for $1,500, $3,000. Same things with the Sequoias, $1,000, $2,500. And, with this craze and with marketplace and the internet kind of distorting those prices. Now we're
Man.
looking at like 7-8 grand for just an old, clapped out, whatever vehicle. That's true. Like with anything right now. So like
Right.
all these little underdogs, if you will, vehicles, they're getting harder and harder to find. So that's a pretty killer story, man, that your buddy was wanting to trade you for that. But
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Dude actually met me at if you're from around Oklahoma at all, you'll know about Quick Trips. It's a convenience store, most popular convenience store here. I actually met the dude at a Quick Trip parking lot just kind of randomly. And he was like, oh, yeah. And I was like, yeah, it's a little small for me. And he's like, actually, this vehicle's too big for me. And I was like, hey.
nice.
It's like a Goldilocks kind of situation. I kind of fell into
That's
the right
cool.
one.
That is true, man. That's awesome. And like I've got the third Gen 4 I've already said that, but like the Sequoias are just like a hair bigger. And like for my family, I think that might be a good move for me down the road, maybe to go up to that. They're a little, does yours have third row?
Yes. Yeah. I've actually, at the moment, have everything out of it because me and my wife, we like to camp out of it. Overland, of course. And also I work out of it full time, so a lot of times, like I said, since I'm business to business mostly before, I kind of go from business to business, of course, and unload my tools there, do the work I need to do, pack back up, go to the next shop,
cool.
Do the work. So now that I'm retail, I'm wanting to get a little more closer to that, but, getting into my own shop and stuff. Luckily I've got some good friends over at Okie Overland that, we paired up and partnered up in a lot of ways. So that's
Very
definitely
cool.
been beneficial for both of us. Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's a good segue into where today's topic is. And we're going to, you're going to be the guy guiding this show. I know little to none about, dual battery systems. If you've got to upgrade your alternator, if we're worried about catching our vehicles on fire safely, doing this thing. So I'm going to let you pretty much drive this boat, if you will, and I'll chime in here and there just to kind of, ask perspective from an outsider, and then you can kind of school us all. I think there's a lot of people out there, especially in the overland world, it's a little overwhelming, whenever you're running a 12-volt fridge, and then you've got, maybe a Jackery or something you want to charge, and then, of course, camera gear, laptops, and if you're running auxiliary lights, all this stuff could be like really overwhelming, especially if you have no idea what you're talking about. So without further ado, tell us what you do. What is your your niche? What do you do for those that are listening?
So my main job essentially is, I outfit vehicles with 12-volt accessories, second battery setup, solar panels, all sorts of stuff like that. I even do some hot rod rewires and stuff like that, LS swap harnesses and stuff. But the overlanding scene definitely grabbed a hold of me, and being able to be in this scene got me going, I think, really as well as it's gone. Outfitting some different, local camper companies with designs and build outs for their campers. Everything from just a little single battery to, a whole Manager 30 set up with a Expion 360, 360 amp hour battery and onboard everything, onboard water, gray tanks, all that kind of stuff. So really I started out in the 12-volt stuff. I'm doing a little bit more at the moment. But man, it's kept me busy, and I'm definitely passionate about it. And a lot of people are, this is stuff that, as long as the safety, I try to preach on safety, and that's kind of, I'd like that to be my first topic here, just out of principle. As long as you are making sure, and there's, easy charts online for you to make sure that your wire gauge is about correct. I know a lot of it definitely still gets confusing, and that's where I usually come in. But wire gauge is at least the size that you need, a little bit bigger. I always go a little bit bigger than what's necessary, just in case you want to push any more wire through or more power through that. And fuses. Man, I cannot tell people enough about freaking fuses. I love breakers too, but I've seen them fail on too many times, and that's at that point you might as well just have a wrench between your fuse in your fuse box. You know what I mean? Just holding that together. So I just, I outfit everybody, with 12-volt stuff. I try to make sure everybody's safe, and I love being a kind of a center point for people to come talk, ask questions, stuff like that. I like communicating in this industry a lot with people, seeing where people are going, where they've been, and just help them make sure that they've got some peace of mind on the road, making sure things are safe. The threats with electricity, a lot of times you can't see.
Absolutely. So if someone's getting into this like myself, I've got 2 or 3 portable power stations, they're all different amp hours or watt hours. If I'm taking, typically for me, I'm running my fridge, which I run that off my cigarette lighter during the day with a fully charged power bank. So at night, when the truck's not running, I plug it into my power bank, and then hopefully the next day, I'm not even recharging my power bank during the drive. I need to figure that out with maybe an inverter or something. And then,
right.
So typically, if I'm at camp, I look for, if it's sunny out, I could top off, my charger for a little bit there with my little solar, that's portable solar. And that's worked for me for the last, let's see here. I got that fridge back in December. So only for like the last 7, 8 months have I really been using the fridge where I needed that extra power. Before that,
Right.
It's just cell phones, make sure those are topped off. If I took a laptop or a tablet or something, make sure those are topped off. But for me, it was just really minimal and basic. But now as I'm upping my equipment, if you will, you're upgrading from a cooler to a fridge. What's next?
Right.
I don't know. Maybe more auxiliary lights. I mean, a blender. I don't know. So it's like, what do we? How do we make these decisions? Especially if you're a novice in all this.
Right. I think the main thing is just kind of what's your comfort level, what really kind of appeals to you. All of this is very subjective, and I love that you touched on the point of the power banks. Because I've been seeing people use those in a lot more interesting ways, and I've been able to kind of help people with that and using those in non-typical ways, something you wouldn't really think of. A build I did here recently, actually, it was a pretty small build out. Still not quite inexpensive due to the power bank itself being a little bit pricier. I don't know which brand it was. Great one though. My client Chuck over at 50 Tactical came in and basically said, "Hey, I'd like to be able to like kind of through charge this power bank off of my truck, and then that way, whenever I shut it off, so I did a key switched or ignition switched relay. Whenever I shut it off, I want it to be able to continue to run the fridge off of the power bank itself. So we basically kind of just did that. Power bank luckily had kind of pass through charging." And so we were able to charge that while he's not using it. And of course, as the compressor drops and everything, it stops drawing so much amperage. It still also puts a little bit more into the power bank itself. So being able to see people use those in unique ways, he's got a YouTube channel and stuff. He has lots of equipment to charge, so those power banks have been really interesting to see. I still love the dual battery setup. I'm a little biased. It's very proprietary. But yeah, the power banks have been something really cool coming to the industry for sure. And still, I'm hooking these guys up with that kind of rig up and stuff too. So, I think it's really just what you need personally. You might want to run a little bit more equipment, cameras, stuff like that off of it. In your case, I'd either suggest a pretty large power bank. If once you start upgrading a little bit more, or let's put some permanent amp hours in that truck. Let's get that 400.
So if running. I'm wanting to top off my Jackery or Blue Yeti or whatever, what do I need? What am I going to get an inverter, or are we going to hardwire something? What's going on there?
It kind of depends on the power station itself. Like I said, that one that I just installed the charging system for, we were able to just do basically some USB-C, USBs, and just regular 12-volt cigarette lighter kind of plug for him to be able to charge that off of there, because it's got that DC charging. Any of them that don't have a DC charging, I would definitely suggest an inverter. There's lots of different ways to go on that. And that's, again, kind of depending on the size of thing you're wanting to use, how much you're going to be using it. But at that point, once you go inverter, I definitely suggest a second battery setup.
Okay. And so like right now, I've got like a Blue Yeti. I don't even know what the thing is, but it's like a 700 or 800 watt hour power bank. So if I'm charging that, off my DC charger from my rig, it's not going to top it off as fast as if I had, maybe an inverter or something like that, correct?
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. The inverter, whenever you get to charge it with AC, it does it a little bit faster. It's all kind of beefed up, and you get to run a lot more amperage through that charging port, essentially.
Okay. And that
So
takes the
inverter's definitely
strain
a good
too
way to
off
keep
like
doing that.
your, well, it takes off strain from like your alternator too, correct? Or even your house battery, or does that even affect it like that?
The house battery, it's still going to put just as much strain on the house battery, but the thing is, the house battery essentially kind of acts as a capacitor between whatever you're running and the alternator or your start battery. It basically just, with most of these chargers these days, it pulls a certain amperage. Usually it's pretty minuscule. It's not anything your vehicle will usually notice. If you've got a smart alternator, that can be a little more difficult. I like to go with a smart charger if that's the case, because it feeds back power and keeps any codes from coming up. But for the most part, yeah, it protects the second battery itself, will protect all of the rest of the system from taking too much of a strain. And the inverter, of course, pulling on that house battery. Lithium's pretty resilient. And one of the benefits with lithium is you can drain it almost all the way down. So whenever you see something that says 100 amp hours and it's lithium, you've got an actual 100 amp hours. If you're going with something under the hood, like a gel cell or a lead acid, you're only getting 50% of that. So if it says 100 amp hours, you've actually got 50 amp hours, taking up just the same amount of space.
Well, let's talk about lithium batteries because I know that's been the latest craze here lately. Is because you get a 100 amp hour lithium battery, and you could run whatever all night, and you're down like what 10% maybe,
right?
On that, and then you can top it off just as easily. So how just for people like me that don't know anything about this stuff, really dumb it down for us. For let's say we like the portability of a power bank, but we're going to need something with a little bit more kick to keep up with our, adventures and stuff like that. So now we're going to, try to get into a dual battery setup. Talk to us about that and your thought process to go about that.
Usually in a dual battery setup, I start most people off on a 100 amp hour battery. That usually takes care of, for most people, honestly, it takes care of more than what they'll ever need. Once you start getting into water pumps, you start getting into things running all night, lots of camp lights, stuff like that. Luckily, the LED and the efficiency of a lot of the electronics these days kind of upholds with the lithium a little better. But the lithium batteries, usually I try to think of, what size batteries this person going to need. What are they running? You're running a fridge, 24/7 off of it. So we're probably going to want at least 20 amps of charging or 25 amps of charging. Just to keep that, so we can charge the battery while it's still running the fridge. So then that brings me to the next point. Let's go find a charger. What's going to work for people? Well, if you're, you don't have a whole lot of space inside the vehicle, we're just barely able to squeeze that battery in. A lot of times I'll go with, the Red Arc BCDC 1225. It's a waterproof unit, real small, fits under the hood really well. They do really nice, real compact, but if you aren't super, dying for space in your rig and we're able to set out kind of an area, I'll go with something a little bigger, kind of like one of the Renogy chargers. Most of these have the MTTP built into them, which is the solar charger. So that also helps. And that's one thing I like to talk to people about too is, hey, are you going to be running this, fridge all the time? How often are you going to be starting your vehicle and moving? Are you just going to be out for a weekend? Are you going to be out for a week at a time? Lots of my clients like to go out and go backpacking, and they'll be out of there for quite some time out in the wilderness. So it gives it plenty of time for that battery to drain down. If you can put 100 amp hour, or, just 100 amp hour alone on there of solar, even if it's a portable solar power, that kind of helps keep that battery topped off so that you don't come back to bad food, which is kind of important out on the trail.
That would be nasty. So a lot of people also ask lately in like the Budget Overland Facebook group, they'll be like, hey, what kind of solar you guys running? I'm assuming a hard mount solar. Mine's portable, and it's like some off-brand thing that's got a universal port for every power bank known to man right now. I got like 16 different, and that's it works awesome. Well. And it's funny because, to me, it's funny. I know Mr. Budge Overland here, but like, you know, some of the stuff, you know, you could cheap out on some stuff you don't cheap out on, but you know, budget doesn't necessarily mean cheap either, and that's the whole thing. You know, a lot of listeners and a lot of people that are involved over the years understand that. But anyway, so if you're talking like, hey, I want some hard panels, solar panels, you know, like old school stuff, you know, they're like 2 inches thick, and you know, maybe a 4x8 sheet or something on top of your rig. Who's got room for that? B, there's like those flexible panels now too. A lot of people like throwing on their hoods. I don't know if it's for looks, but like I've got mixed feelings on both of those and functionality. I mean,
Right.
can you nip this one in the bud for us? And then what kind of solar panels do you get? If any, a lot of people say you don't even need solar panels.
Right. Yeah. Well, and a lot of times I will point people to more power just because so many people, like I said, will go out for a weekender adventure. And sure, they use a lot of power off the bat, you know, run diesel heaters, stuff like that, fans. But man, if you're going to be starting it every day, solar's not as necessary. If you start going on those longer weekends, 3-day weekend, 4-day weekend, I think that solar panels are pretty crucial once you get up into like the week long, you know, you're staying for 5 to 7 days. Solar is definitely necessary. Like I said, to keep that, you know, in case you don't, you know, you find a good spot, you post up in that perfect spot the first day, you're not going to start it again. You want it to continuously kind of put that charge back in your battery so you never have to worry about it. So I personally don't like the flexible solar panels as much. I probably need to educate myself more on them, but not the ones that mount on your hood. The ones that mount on your hood, I haven't seen any issues with yet. But the ones that are kind of just a super thin glue down kind of situation over to the top of your roof, you run into the problem of they actually spec those to have airflow underneath them. So they really kind of want you to build a frame for it. Maybe put it on some sort of like corrugated plastic where it can get airflow up underneath it. But then you're thickening the thing back up, right? Like on a wind stream that might be necessary because of the curved roof. And therefore that might actually work. It's kind of a formable, solar panel, but for most people, man, a hard 100-watt panel, is going to really trickle in, you know, 10, 15 amps of power at full sun. And that's honestly more than what most people need. I mean, it works really well for people. I'd say as long as you got a 100 amp hour battery and, you know, a hard panel on top of your rig, you've got 100 watts, you know, you've got a pretty good setup going on there. I mean, and I run into people saying, well, is my portable 100-watt, you know, just as good? Yeah, your portable 100 watts just as good, you know. Even better in some cases. You can move it around and keep it in the sun, you know, instead of turning the whole rig around and trying to, you know, tilt it to the right direction for the sun.
That's true. And with all this goofy stuff nowadays, you know, the next coolest thing is going to be here in 6 months, you know, so it's like, it's ever changing. And I always tell people, like, even with smartphones, you know, if you're mad at your smartphone and you can't figure it out, well, just wait 6 months. You're going to be even more mad because you're not adapting to that change. So it's like, you got to kind of keep up on this, really. And, you know, I'd say if you buy like a lithium battery right now and maybe whatever kind of solar panels or anything like that, you're going to be good for the next 5 to 7 years, maybe. And then go back to the next big thing, you know, or whatever, because they're probably going to make them smaller and last longer and charge faster and all that stuff.
Exactly. And I run into that a lot. I actually was just talking with Tate about that up at Okie Overland. We were joking around, and I was like, man, you know, we're getting some good deals on lithium batteries now. That's kind of coming down a little bit more. Used to the average for a 100 amp hour lithium battery, just basic, was closer to $1,000. You know, and that's a big pull out of your pocket there. You know,
where are they at right now? Ballpark.
Man, you can get some really good deals, but for the most part, you're looking at like $650, $700. So they're coming down quite a bit percentage wise, and that's what Tate was talking about. You know, we were looking at the same battery as what he has currently, and he's like, man, I kind of feel like a fool. I bought that smart battery, you know, so long ago, and I've, you know, it's depreciated in value so much just from the factory, brand new. And I was like, man, you can't really think about it like that, because really, it's not like you've lost anything. It's still a lithium battery. You still got 100 amp hours. They haven't gotten a whole lot smaller yet. And really, most of your equipment and most of your gear is pulling less amperage. So even as your battery kind of gets older, it's still lasting pretty long, you know, 5-6 years in. because, phone chargers are a little bit more efficient. They charge a little faster, all the different things that they do to not take so much energy out of your battery in the first place.
Yeah. Well, Tate's, and that's another thing. Me and him, we've shared campfires before, and it's kind of like we've talked about this. And like at the time, I wasn't very interested. I mean, I was interested. I was intrigued. I wasn't like taking notes. Now I'm taking notes, but it's like all this stuff could just go right over your head. And he seemed to really have a really good grasp on it and how it works and everything. But it's kind of like, talking about, like rooftop tents and stuff. I mean, you're going to pay for this stuff. And then like, oh crap, in a year from now, they're half price, probably not half price, but they're going to come off maybe because the next biggest thing's coming out. But if you're getting use out of it and you're enjoying it, who cares? I mean, it's like anything. You go buy a brand new, curved TV. When was that? Like 3 or 4 years ago. It was a huge thing. Get the curved TVs. Well, now it's like they're giving them away. So it's like it's all in the moment, folks. If you're the guy that has to have the latest and greatest, you're going to always pay double, triple for it. So anyway, it doesn't get your use out of it. And if you're getting enjoyment, who cares?
I like to think about that kind of stuff, kind of just like they do. It's kind of corny, but it's corny because it's used so much. It often falls to be true. Like with my Sequoia, so many people are like, man, how do you run around in a big rig like that? I'm like, look, it's miles per gallon, man. And I like to think of that as the same thing with the depreciation value of, your rooftop tent, stuff like that. Get out there and use it. Get the use out of it. Get the fun out of it. You know what I mean? Like whenever you sell it secondhand, you want to be having to sell that thing with a couple of patches and the canvas. And, it's seen some things, so
that's right.
Definitely get out there and use it and really just be happy about getting to use that kind of stuff. And whenever the next greatest thing comes out, I like to skip a couple models on the phones and wait.
Yep.
Now that I'm having to do so much more like TikTok and Instagram and stuff like that, I kind of need a decent camera and stuff. So now I'm having to keep up a little more, but man, I was definitely one of those people. I'll skip a few models. I don't care. I'll get as much use out of my cell phone as possible and then swap it for the next, the next good one.
That's how they get you though. Like we've got the iPhone 14, I think, or 13. Yeah. 13 came out a couple years ago, and then like 7 months later they came out with the 14, and now they're coming out with another one. It's like, well, we're just so stupid and gullible to let them do this to us. It's like some people have to have the latest, though. It's funny.
For sure.
But it's all hindsight. If you step back and kind of look at the bigger picture, if it fits your budget, if it fits your needs, who cares? So,
yeah, and that's the biggest thing, man. I'm definitely a budget guy myself. I like budgets. I know I do. It's kind of ironic because I do higher end installs. I'm not cheap per se, whenever it comes to building your rig out, but I oftentimes I'll ask somebody, hey, what do you think it's going to cost to have me do this job for you? And they're like, I mean, man, $1,500 is a steep price for this. I wasn't really wanting to spend that. And they go, well, I also don't want to pay another $6,000-$7,000 to get another rig when I burn this one down.
Right.
So, and they're like, a lot of people do. A lot of people are careful in going out there. Tate is one of those guys that's self-taught, and I'd leave it up to Tate to build out my rig. You know what I mean? I'd trust him to make it safe for the most part. Lots of guys can go out there, and as long as you focus on safety, man, you can definitely budget it out. But I kind of feed more into the clientele that just doesn't want to take the time to deal with that. They're usually more just like, I'm ready to just get on the road. I want that,
So if I'm going to build out one with dual battery system, you hear Regency and Red Arc, who's the better of the two? You start hearing these brands and stuff. Like, how do we make these and like lithium batteries? Who do we buy? Like what brands can you trust?
Man, I'm a horrible person to ask this question to because I love them all. I've been, in close acquaintance anyways with Brucey over there at Red Arc in Australia. We've talked quite a few times. I did one of their build outs for them, the one that did Moab here a couple of years ago, their Land Cruiser. And I love Red Arc. They're pretty up there in innovation and making reliability. Those guys over there in Australia, that's kind of what they do all the time. So it's pretty crazy to get, these guys know what they need to freaking build before we ever even get there hardly. So, I love, Red Arc. I love Renogy. They've all got their pros and cons, but honestly, man, it's kind of a rat race right now with technology. Everybody's putting out something better and better. And it's honestly with this stuff, I think it really is even more than like cell phones. You get a cell phone and it's got, 15 more megapixels or something like that. It's okay, cool. Is it worth me upgrading for an extra $1,000? Is it worth dropping that kind of money on? Well, these things are, we're getting to the point to where some things will come with a little 12-volt battery monitor. It just tells you what voltage you're getting out of there. Next thing you know, for the same price, that same company is coming out with like a full-fledged screen. Red Arc's coming out with something that'll read your water levels for you. So if you've got, up to, I think, four water tanks, that'll read all of your water levels and display that. So really, man, that Bluetooth compatibility and this technology is getting kind of cheaper and easier to produce. More people are researching into it. It's making it to where I can't stay completely brand specific. I'm, like I said, I'm a horrible person to ask about this because I love them all. And, innovation is innovation.
Are they pretty much, what am I trying to say here? Mix and match them? Can they work together? Are they compatible with one another?
A lot of things are. For example, I've had people come to me and they're like, "Hey, I want to put a Renogy smart battery in there with a Bluetooth monitor on it, and I want to do the cheapest charger I can, and I want to do that. If that works for your build, that works for your build. That's where a lot of people go budget, just to be able to kind of monitor everything in their battery, and so you can definitely mix and match some of the things. I think Renogy's coming out with a lot of things that are, I don't mean to keep name dropping too much here, but
no, I don't care, man. This is great.
With so many freaking things that just like, well, this links to that and that links to that, to the point to where you're like, oh man, I should just buy this whole thing, and they're selling big packages and stuff like that, the battery, the M1 monitor, the charger, all in a whole setup, so they're making it real easy to do that. But for the most part, yeah, you can definitely mix and match. You can definitely kind of just, this brand battery, that brand charger. It's really, again, it's dependent on your application. Red Arc, yeah. I love for under the hood applications. Never having to run power into the vehicle in the first place. If somebody's going, lead acid or gel cell up under the hood. But if we're going inside, we got the space. We don't need the waterproof. I like I like trying to stick them together just in case they do come out with something new that links it all together.
Yeah.
And that's what you're seeing a lot of times with these new brands.
So going back to like space, if space is an issue for someone, I've got a friend or a few friends that actually have, I would call them module power banks, but they're it's a dual battery, and all that's like in a Plano case or something in the bed of their truck or in the back of their SUV. It's a quick connect. If they need to take it out, they can unplug it, put it in the garage, whatever. But that's, you're talking 50 pounds or whatever worth of gear there. But it's modular to where they can still take it out. If you need your pickup truck for a pickup truck, just get it out of there. Or if you need room in the back of your SUV, are there any insights, pros or cons to that? Or is kind of the same thing?
It's pretty similar. I like to have as few connections as possible. So having all those plugs and stuff, isn't necessarily my favorite, man. It's whatever works. You know what I mean? Like you said,
yeah.
Some people don't have the opportunity to just completely fit their rig out. I'm a good show of that right there. I can't just completely fit it out with a bed and stuff like that the way I want to full time, because I have to be able to work out of it, and
yeah.
Some people need their vehicle for that kind of thing. And in that application, for sure, I would say put you a couple plugs on there, make it easy to just unplug your battery and your accessories, yank that out and use it as a rig.
So I had to bring that up for somebody who had to sell this pitch. They had to pitch this to their wives, because if they're like, well, honey, if you put a dual battery, we just won't have room for the kids anymore. Yeah. Well, honey, I could unplug it and take it out. Yeah. So if you're that guy out there, you owe me a beer or something. I think it's great.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, it's a good pitch. For sure, it's a good pitch.
That's funny. It's just like you need this new turbo, which is actually, we need a new alternator, but it's a turbo, so you got to put that on. Anyway.
That's a little step further.
So let's get into are you on Facebook right now? Let's get on here and check out some of these questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I was just looking at it. Dylan?
Or is it growing? Is the list growing?
Yeah. Dylan's asking if he can fit 40s on a Jeep with no lift. I'd say with a big enough hammer, you can.
Anything is possible. I like Dylan. He's funny. We get our sense of humors crossed there sometimes, but I think it's great.
For sure.
Where I need to refresh this page real quick. Yeah, I was like, it sounds like you need a Toyota swap. He's got a Gladiator, I think. Some kind of Fiat, I'm not sure. But guys, I don't hate on Jeeps. A lot of people think that this channel is a Toyota channel or a podcast. It's not, guys. I like Jeeps.
Oh, it's not? I've got to end this call now. I can't.
I'm new to all this stuff, guys. Literally, I just feel like I'm talking to myself because I can't see it. Let's do some split screens here. I think I could share my screen. I think that'll be
there you
fine.
go. Yeah.
So what do you want to talk about while I'm figuring this out? You got anything you could tell the world out there?
Oh man, have we? We've already talked about, of course, fusing and all of that. Battery safety. Essentially, I try to start off with that. Man, I like getting to see people get out there and get working with those rigs and getting fish, hunting, whatever. Oh gosh.
Tate said that your guys' area is really big with like the fishermen, the fishing community. As far as people outfitting themselves with like this kind of thing, rigs and solar and stuff. It's like,
yeah, man. And I've
it's
even
a
had
big
a couple
outdoors industry.
Yeah, for sure. And I've had a couple of clients even come to me with, like their powered kayaks and stuff like that, wanting to be able to charge those in the bed of their truck.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's really neat. And being able to camp off of that rig too, whenever they get into competitions like that, I had no idea just how crazy and competitive it can be, especially whenever you're, 150 people deep on one dock, with all kayaks, getting ready to start off on that starting line. It sounds pretty intense. And I imagine being able to go back and just charge that up and be ready for the next day, is pretty, that
is cool.
Lucky. And also I've had a lot of people come around with, covered trailers, for example, enclosed trailers that want to do a power bank in there. And I'm like, man, as much as I appreciate you coming to me, I don't understand it. What are you using it for? Oh, we like to go elk hunting, and then we come back and we like to pack a bunch of fridges and freezers in here, deep freezers, with meat, and be able to haul it back ourselves instead of having to, fly it back or something like that. So they'll just quarter stuff out and throw it in the freezer and haul it back down here. So it's been.
What kind of freezer? Well, like a house freezer?
Like a house freezer. Yeah. Yeah. If you get like a chest freezer that's, and you get the right inverter and a large enough battery or enough amp hours of battery really is all that matters. You can run that thing for days and days and days, especially if you got, like I said, if you got solar.
I'm not name dropping anybody, but wasn't that Yeti's claim to fame? You could have it all in here, get some ice, and it'll last days. Bring it back with,
Hey,
they were targeting the hunters and stuff.
I see people using both. I see people using both of them, man, to be honest. I see them packing out the quarters, in those Yetis, and then toss them in the freezer just in case they want to stay in the hotel. They don't want to keep up with ice at all.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
it's been pretty nice.
Well, I can't. I'm too stupid to do the split screen with you, but I'll read some of these off. You take notes, but I'm going to just go through here. If you find one you want to talk on, start talking. If not, I'll just skip you and go down to the next one. So Brian says, I'm thinking about doing a single or dual life in the bed of my truck in the future. Big questions are alternator output required, best management / insulation system, insulation system for the battery. Would it be better to just get a power station and use the 100-watt outlet? Hold on. In the bed of the taco, keep it charged while driving. So much research done, and to do more questions. Anyway.
Yeah.
Hopefully you understood that.
Yeah. I like I said earlier, I think it would depend on your application, to be honest. If the power bank that you're looking at would be, DC chargeable, I'd say definitely just throw a DC, a DC plug back there, ignition switched. If it's not, definitely looking into using that 100-watt outlet or doing another inverter. And also, it kind of comes down to also, do you need to use it outside of your truck, or would it be easier for it to just be on the rig? That's where we kind of run into that question of like, or do we need it to be portable? Like I said, off the rig, or do
Yeah.
we need it to be stationary and able to be charged? Just conveniently, just start the vehicle, let it charge by solar. Don't have to mess with anything; it's already working. So I definitely say, Brian, what are you using? What are you going to be using that for, essentially?
Hmm.
And do you need it to be portable? If not, honestly, I'd go with a proprietary house battery. And like he said before, you can definitely do that in a modular unit to where you can definitely use a Anderson plug to disconnect that, and maybe a 6 pin or a 10 pin to disconnect all of the positives on there too. So it's definitely situational. I'd like to talk to you more on that, Brian. Definitely feel free to hit me up and we can chat with that a little bit more just to see
Sweet.
what your situation is.
So Brian just got a third gen Tacoma, and he's outfitting it specifically for this. And it's cool to see. I always tell people we're all on different journeys. So like my journey started 4 or 5 years ago in this, and I laughed at everybody that had a jet boil. I laughed at everybody that had a rooftop tent, and up until a couple of years ago, I laughed at people that had an onboard power bank system. I was like, that's idiotic. What are you gonna put a washing machine on there or something? What are you gonna do? And here I am today, and always, and there's another thing, like back when we were talking like portable or stationary. If you're gonna spend $500-600, is gonna help you, around the house. If you have a power outage or something, you could take that with you. If you're going to a ball game and you need that power source with you, the best budget buys are multi-use items. So if you're gonna spend that money up initially, and if you can get away with it, perfect. But once you have stuff hardwired to your truck, not unless you're going to take that truck with you everywhere. It's stuff that you have to check off your own list, of pros and cons, what you really need out of it. So I think that's great that we're talking about all this.
I think weighing the pros and cons is definitely the solution to that. Really, really figure out just kind of like budgeting, man. You want to kind of
Yeah.
see what are you trying to accomplish in the first place. What do you need to
Mm-hmm.
accomplish? What accomplishes that job? And then just trying to figure out the best way to do that. And if it's a budget build and you do it yourself, it's definitely doable. You just need to make sure to do your research, make sure your wire gauge is the right size, make sure everything's grounded well. I can't express that enough. How many times I've
Yeah.
seen things just screwed to carpet trying to ground it off, you know what I mean? The metal through the carpet, and it's like, man, just pull back that carpet, make a good ground,
Hey,
make sure you've got a
and
proper
take
size
some
fuse.
and take some sandpaper, sand down that paint. Let's get some metal contact here, folks.
At the
So
very least.
it's that little stuff. All right, let's go on down here, and we've touched on a lot of this stuff. I'm just going to go down in order. Reverend Paul from what is it? Wandering Possum. That's right. I'd like more info about adding a second battery. What kind? Best options for hooking it up. Pretty sure we touched on that.
Yeah, I'd say we kind of touched on that. Paul, I like Reverend Paul. Um, I honestly, personally, have been loving the Renogy stuff right now. I'm not a super brand specific person, but the packages you can kind of get through them, you're getting a lot of really good monitoring, really good quality products too. It just kind of depends on what's in your budget, man.
So is it Regency?
Renogy,
Renogy.
yeah,
Do they sell batteries too? The lithium batteries?
mm-hmm. Yeah, they've
All
got
right, cool.
some of my favorite batteries out there right now. And again,
Right
like I
on.
said, that might change next week. I love innovation. I love seeing people come up with really actually useful stuff. And, paying for innovation's not a small thing.
Ben Gonzalez, he went with a 100-watt solar panel, 12-volt inverter to deep cycle marine battery with a jackery to assist. Next up is dual battery mod with aux battery for fridge and fans. What do you
Yeah,
think about that?
I like that setup. That sounds like a great setup, especially with the fact that you've got that jackery and the second battery. It says deep cycle marine battery, so you're running lead acid or gel cell.
Okay.
Depending on where you got that gel cell at, man, you might look into maybe just doing a lithium, if it's inside, or you can make it waterproof if it's not under the hood, essentially.
Mm.
That's going to be basically doubling up on your battery power alone, just because, like I said before, the lithium you can discharge almost all the way down to 0%. With a marine battery, deep cycle marine battery, They've been around forever. We've been using them forever. Still love them. They're great for under the hood applications, but you can only discharge that down to about 50%. So you're only getting half of what you could get. So you can double it right there if you can find a place to put a lithium inside your rig. You're already doubling the amount of power. So you're probably seeing that Jackery do more honestly than that DC power. And I would look into upgrading the battery if anything, before adding a second one. It sounds like if you've got room to add a second house battery, it sounds like you're probably doing it inside or in the bed of your truck. We can make that waterproof, and I would go lithium with that one.
Very nice. Yeah, because earlier you're saying that the acid batteries or the gel cells are about 50% of what they're rated.
Right. And well, they're rated at 100 amp hour, and that's true. But once you get them 50% discharge, they're at too low of a voltage to be able to actually run most of your equipment anyway. So again, it basically gets down to 50% of that. You get 50 amp hours out of it, let's say, 45 amp hours out of it. And we start to run to, man, I've got flicking lights. These things keep turning on and off. I'm getting warnings from everything. It's just you're running on way too low of a battery percentage, on the too low of a voltage.
All right. Let's move on here. Gideon Watkins, are the heated lithium batteries worth it? Should I keep them in the cab anyways?
Yeah, Gideon. I love this question. It really, again, it's situational. It depends on what you're doing. Are you doing a lot of wintertime camping? Are you going up north where you're seeing a lot more of that cold weather? If that's the case, then yes, heated lithium batteries are fantastic. A lot of times when we're putting them in like the tongue box of a camper trailer, we like to go heated just because it's a lot less insulated in there. You're going to see a lot more of that cold weather start affecting the shutoffs on those batteries and keeping them from charging. So I would say, yeah, depending on your application, if you're a summertime camper, summer and fall and spring, Oklahoma, we don't see that low of temperatures usually anyways. But man, if you're getting out there in the real cold weather, I would say definitely a heated lithium battery is worth it. I like one that has the option inside the battery built in if you're going to go that direction though.
Cool. Moving on. This is a solar panel question from Ed Geeson. Why are so many people against the cheaper solar panels? I have used them for years with great results. I personally prefer lead acid batteries to lithium, mainly for their stability and ease of use. I sacrifice the weight to carry them. They are really heavy.
Yeah.
Takes on that. Touch on it. It sounds like a personal preference. You can touch on how you want.
Yeah, it's most definitely a personal preference, man. If you're doing it underneath the hood, I feel like everything's got its place, right? So, like I said before, AGM, gel cell, or lead acid, lithium can't stand underneath the hood. Lithium does not do well with that high of a temperature. And again, hitting those low lows, it's under the hood. There's literally no insulation. Lithium's a little weaker whenever it comes to that aspect. So I definitely see your viewpoint on that, and definitely agree that I feel like, but the thing is they just have their place more than anything. As to why people hate on the cheaper solar panels, I think honestly, because a lot of times the way that they're built, the science and engineering that goes into them, you're getting less out of your cheaper solar panels than what you would one of the more expensive ones. But for the most part, I think it's just a brand specific debate. Benji here knows exactly what I'm talking about. If you go on any of the Toyota forums and you're like, hey, what lower ball joints can I use? Can I use, Moog ball joints or whatever? And people are like, no, you've got to go OEM. It's trash.
Right.
And this and that. Man, and then you'll see people on there that are, I've learned Moog my whole life. I've never had a problem. It's definitely, a lot of that's still just people, again, gatekeeping that community. Don't buy batteries. Don't buy, solar panels unless you can afford to get this blah, blah, blah. Man, those cheaper ones exist for a reason. And again,
yeah,
especially if you're going cheaper, I would just triple check that you are fusing everything properly. You're taking all those precautions, because unfortunately that cheaper tech sometimes is less reliable. You're going to have some of those safety features cut out in a lot of that stuff. So definitely just make sure to add your own. And another good point to this too, on your lead acid or gel cell battery question there, if you're going to use that kind of thing inside, those need to be vented. They need to be kind of in their own box and vented outside. If you're going to be putting inside your truck, a lot of people aren't comfortable cutting big, 2-inch, 3-inch holes to put vents in the side of their truck for them. That's again where lithium kind of comes in. You don't get that off gas from the
Right.
lithium the way you do, an AGM. Or, lithium you can kind of turn on its side. You can turn it upside down. You can mount it however you want to. They don't necessarily suggest that, but there's no liquid in them. So you can kind of make it fit to your application inside the vehicle as opposed to an
Yeah.
AGM or gel cell. You're stuck where you're at with those.
Yeah. It's just technology, man. I mean, it's the next step. It's one could argue it's safer and better, but I mean, if you flip your rig or whatever and you're there for a while, who knows what could happen.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah, and that's one thing I try to tell my customers constantly is that, hey, man, whenever it comes to you getting on your side or even flipping it upside down, I want you to be able to. Not that I want to see it happen,
Yeah.
but I want to be able to see you flip your rig up on its head for hours and watch the battery and power system stay in place. Because once you've got 12 volt and ground moving around in there by itself freely, that gets a little more scary. You get more into that fire risk and stuff like that. So I personally like something I can flip on its head and not have to worry about it. I'm a overbuild kind of person.
I like it. Hey, we got about 4 questions and just kind of touch on them how you want. I know I've already proofread some of them. Some of them we've already touched on, but this one's a pretty good question from Patrick Menard. Have a question. I have a Manager 30 in my skinny guy camper and want to put my BCDC 1225 in my truck. I don't have the SG on the truck. Question is, I'm running a 6 gauge from my starter to the Manager 30. Can I come off that 6 gauge to both the Manager 30 and the BCDC? I am running and run both. The SG is on the truck. If I butchered that, and run both. The SG is on the truck.
Right. Man, I would honestly, if you're going to run one to split off to both, I would run something more like an aught gauge wire. Again, I'm a huge proponent to up gauging, upsize that wire. You don't want to do crazy big, because you'll run into high resistance problems. That's a little more complicated, but I would definitely not go off of a 6 gauge to get 30 amps out of both sides. Just because likely you're going to run into, that's when we're breaking that power wire. If you start having problems, there's more components you have to worry about. And 2, to have to worry about whether or not that wire is going to get hot from running both at the same time. You're not usually going to see that. 60 amps on a 6 gauge wire should be fine. But just for the fact of being able to have one instead of the other, if one shorts out or something like that, I like to keep them separate. And that's one of the reasons I like this kind of seems off topic, but it'll make sense. I'll connect it back around here. The ARB, for example, dual compressors. A lot of people are like, man, I just cut those 240 amp fuses off there and threw an 80 amp on. It's the same thing. Doesn't matter. It really does matter because one, if you blow if one of the compressors fails on you and it blows that fuse, both compressors don't work anymore. So both chargers, you've got a chance for both chargers not working over one having a short. And then 2, also, you got to worry about, are you pulling too much on that? Are you putting too much on that wire? Are you pulling too much heat through it? You don't want to run into those kinds of problems. So I definitely say just run a proprietary power wire just to be safe, or up gauge a big single power wire to a split off and then do that way. But I wouldn't run both off of the 130 or the 6 gauge wire.
Cool. All right. There's a couple more questions here. This is the $1 million question right here. Scott Kelsch, how much power depends on what you'd be running? So how do you determine, if you've got a 12-volt fridge that's running so-and-so amps, like what kind of power are we talking? Like, how do we do this math? How do we break it down to what our needs are where it's not overkill?
Oh, man. So that's a hard
without
one
going
to answer.
Without going into like crazy amount, can we link something like, is there some sort of calculator or
There's
something
definitely
that we could link in the show notes below where people can go check out on their own time?
Yeah, I'll have to look up which one it is that I use. I even use it sometimes. But it's kind of a conversion chart from watts to amps, and so they make it as complicated as possible to be able to tell,
Right.
So
That's
it's
where I'm
like,
at.
you're like, oh, I'm pulling this many amps with this and I'm pulling this many watts with that. What in the world does that mean? So I like to go to that conversion chart, and really I try to break it all down into amperage, because
Okay.
that's how you're going to know what size fuse to put on there. You don't want to go over like 5 amps more than whatever that piece is using. So a lot of times I try to add a couple amps to whatever it is. And honestly, a lot of this stuff comes with a fuse on it, and those brands have done the engineering to know what size fuse to put in there. So a lot of times, honestly, I'll pop the box open, pop that fuse holder open. Oh, it's got a 20 amp fuse. We know that we're running 20 amps here, 40 amps there, whatever you want. And are we going to be running all this at the same time? That's another question you got to take into account. If you're going to be running all this at the same time, you're going to be drawing more power more quickly. So,
Cool.
Again, oversizing is where it's at. Any chance you get, oversize the battery size, anything you want.
Someone asked this question the other day. It was last week, and I was like, gosh, this would make such a great podcast, such a great episode. And then like 3 days later, I ran into you, and it didn't even click in my brain to ask you. Wade had to be like, hey, Benji, that would make a great podcast. So anyway, that's how in the moment I am. So I think this is great. If like at the end of the show, I'm going to get all this information from Jacob, and we're going to put all this down in the show notes. So if you're driving right now and you want to check this stuff out later, scroll down to the show notes right below and check all this stuff out. But before we end this, there's a couple good questions here I just really want to touch on.
Of course.
Luke Katz, do you need a breaker between an inverter/charger and one GFCI outlet?
It's always good to be safe. More safe than sorry. I love running breakers, but with a GFCI, it's kind of got the breaker built in. I would also look, depending on the inverter you have, they all have some sort of a safety mechanism, but a lot of times they'll have a GFCI style breaker in them as well. So if that's the case, you're double breakered up. I'd say probably not. But if you want to be double safe, man, go for it. I say if you want to make sure that you're not going to have any issues down the road, for sure, go for it. I would not think that's totally necessary so long as both the inverter and that outlet have it. It's much like in your house. Your GFCI in your bathroom has that breaker. It runs over to the breaker box. If your inverter's got that breaker on it, it's acting like your breaker box as well.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of people, it's nice to have that peace of mind, especially if you're rolling around your house on wheels. For a lot of people out there, I mean, this is full time for them. This is their house.
Yeah.
And,
there's nothing more scary than seeing something, especially when it's yours, man. For me, a customer's vehicle, if ever I saw, anything start going up in smoke, it's terrifying, dude, and it's very in the moment. You think that you're going to be able to go, oh, I'll grab the fire extinguisher, all blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Man, whenever wires get hot and you're not thinking about this kind of stuff, you just let one of those kinds of things slip. It can be fatal at worst. And it definitely fatal to your rig, definitely fatal to your system. So that's why I always try to preach on safety, man. I don't mind giving away safety information for free all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Last question here. This is from Sean Westfall, and we've kind of touched on some of this. What is a good brand for battery isolator? My bad. What is a good brand for battery isolator, and what is the best gauge? What's AWG? What is a good brand, or where to buy a heavy gauge cable?
Yeah, so the cable is another big thing with the safety, believe it or not. Not just upsizing, but making sure that you don't have copper clad aluminum CCA wire. You'll know that because it looks like a lot of wire. You'll pick it up, it's super light. If you snip the end of it off flush and you look down at the end of it and it is silver color, that's copper clad aluminum. You do not want to use that. That stuff rots it oxidizes so quick and it just becomes too small of a wire gauge. Eventually it causes a problem. But a good brand for battery isolator, man, lots of brands. Like I said, we've already mentioned a couple of them, Energy, Red Arc. I've seen lots of other brands coming out with great isolators. It really just depends on what your application is, what your budget is. I love, like I said again, I just keep name dropping them for free here. Y'all are gonna have to sponsor me eventually. Energy with their battery isolators, they seem to be hitting a really good price point. There's lots of upgradable parts to it. You can get the Bluetooth compatibility, all that kind of stuff pretty easily. just with the isolator now even. As far as best wire gauge, we'll link again in the show notes a chart that you can use for DC power. Now, it'll probably only be in DC power. You can also look them up for AC power, like your house power, inverter power as well. But it's going to depend on the application more than anything. So see what you're going to be pulling. If you're running a 60 amp charger or 50 amp charger, that's a lot. I would go up to like 4 gauge at least if you're running, 20 foot or so. But for most applications, 6 gauge is what I like to use. You can get your wire anywhere, but again, make sure it is solid copper or it is tinned copper. Marine applications, stuff like that, do not cheap out on your wire. Make sure to get good wire because that is the foundation of your build.
Cool. Dude, this has been great. I truly appreciate you coming on. I know a lot of people that are listening to this are either really intrigued by this or they clicked off a long time ago. But yeah. I think for the most part, I think if you're going to listen this far, you're truly intrigued by this because it's such a not a dark hole or it could be a rabbit hole. Let's say
quite the rabbit hole, that's for sure.
And
I fell into it about 10 years ago and have never come out.
But it's kind of like overlanding. It's like, oh, okay, all I need is a rig, lift, tires, rooftop tent, a Scott oil, and a drone. I'm an overlander. Well, that looks cool for Instagram, but let's go camping. What actually works for you? I know people that have had rooftop tents that hate them and went back to a ground tent. So it doesn't matter. I mean, we're all on different journeys. It doesn't matter where we're at. We just want to do this safely and educate ourselves to where we're out enjoying nature is truly what we want. So we're going to put a whole bunch of stuff in the show notes, folks. So whenever you're done driving or listening at work or wherever, go back, do some homework on this stuff. We're going to, I don't know how many, I'm going to get with Jacob here after the show and just go over all this stup.
Yeah,
it's overwhelming to me. But we're going to put it all in there to where you guys can navigate it safely. But before we hop off here, how can people get a hold of you, man? Like, we want to follow you and support you. How can we do all that?
Man, I love talking with people. Again, even if you're just building your own build and you want some info, hit me up. If you want to talk about me doing a build for you, getting that extra security in there, let me know. I answer to anything. Facebook, Instagram, they're both the same at Green Country 12V. It's Green Country spelled out, 12V. It's the same thing, greencountry12v.com. You can hit me up on there. You can hit me up at jake@greencountry12v.com, email address, and we'll post up the information. But you guys get a hold of me any way you want to. Go on there. I'd love to hear some people talking in my Instagram as well. I love seeing people ask questions, answering stuff, putting it out there public for people. Because again, it's less about making a buck out here. I love doing what I do for a living, but it's more about growing this community, man. And I'd love to see rigs. I love seeing rigs that both I've built and have had nothing to do with. So I love seeing people just do things the smart way. And just hit us up.
Sweet, man. Truly appreciate you coming on. And this, guys, let me tell you something. This has been a last-minute deal for me to pull, not this episode, but just, like I said, I had 2 international travelers that weren't able to do anything. And then I met Jake literally on Saturday, and it is Wednesday. And, just bless his heart, man, for coming. Like, boys, it's hot. And working all day and then coming on late night like this to do a podcast. I truly appreciate it. And I hope nothing but the best. Dude, we'll be in touch for sure.
Yeah, man, of course. I've really enjoyed being here for sure.
Thank you very much. We're going to put all this stuff below. Guys, go check him out. Support him how you can. Buy something from him. Shoot him an email. Say hello. Say how much you appreciate it. Go follow him on Instagram. Give him a like. Give him a follow. All that jazz. Guys, until next time, I'll see you back here on Overland Shenanigans. Bye-bye.